Hi, Hardeep. Is now a good time for us to plan that computer programming lesson we've been assigned?
Hey, Don. I was just thinking about that, actually. Yes, let's get it out of the way now, shall we? I've got the instructions here. So, it says, design a 45-minute lesson for a class of 16 teenagers where they learn how to write a simple computer program in BASIC.
Now, I know, of course, that BASIC is the computer language people used to use back in the 1980s when they wrote programs on microcomputers, but I'm not sure I feel very comfortable teaching anyone about it.
Well, I did a bit of research yesterday and found out quite a few things, so I think we'll be okay.
Great. So, what do you have in mind?
Well, I think we should presume that none of the kids will know anything about BASIC. So why don't we start with a short multiple-choice quiz? It could focus on things like what BASIC is, what the letters stand for, when people used it, things like that.
That sounds good. I guess it shouldn't take long. Just the first 5 minutes of the lesson, something like that. I don't think we should make the students do it on their own, though. That'd make it too much like a test. Shall we let them do it in twos so they can discuss their choices?
Yes, good idea. Then we'll go through the answers with them as a whole group.
Good. What next?
Well, I've had an idea for the program they could write. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I think the key thing is, though, that before they actually sit at their computers, and I think we should presume that they're doing this lesson in a computer room, they make a flow chart of what they want the program to do. That's usually the best way to start writing a program.
This flow chart will show all the different stages of the computer program, right?
Exactly. It's probably best if the teacher stands at the board and everyone works on that together.
Yes, otherwise they'll all come up with different flow charts and it'll get confusing.
Precisely. I imagine making the flowchart will take about 15 to 20 minutes.
Then they use that to write their computer program.
Well, actually, I think there's a stage before that. You see, the flowchart will be in English. They're going to need to be taught a few basic commands so they can write their computer program.
Now I'm getting out of my depth. What kind of thing would that be?
Well, for example, when you want text to appear on the screen, the command is print in capital letters, followed by the text you want to appear in double inverted commas.
Oh yes, I think I've seen that before.
Right. So they'll need to be taught 5 or 6 commands before they use them to write their program.
Okay, so how shall we do that? With the teacher talking to the whole class again?
Well, we could, but it might be more fun to make it more like a competition, where there are a few teams competing against each other. Each team has maybe 4 or 5 people in it, and they have to do some kind of matching task. You know, they match the command print with to make text appear on the screen, something like that.
That sounds good. Teenagers love competing with each other.
Exactly. And then, for the final part of the lesson, they use their flowchart and the commands they've learned to produce the program. Let's presume, shall we, that there are 8 computers in the room, so that's 2 students for each computer.
That sounds reasonable. So, tell me more about your idea for the computer program they're going to write.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Okay, so it's a very simple program. I've actually written it down here so we can go through it together.
Okay, so the first line says 10 CLS. What on earth does that mean?
Well, every line of a basic computer program starts with a number. They usually go up in tens, so the first line is 10, the second 20, and so on. And CLS is the command we use in BASIC to clear the screen.
Oh, I see. So that's just telling the computer to start with a blank screen.
Exactly. Then we move on to the next line. So this one says, 20, print, guess a number between 1 and 10.
Right, I see. That appears on the screen. It's not that difficult, is it, when you get the hang of it? Let's see if I can work out the next one. 30, input I. Oh, not sure about that.
Well, all that's saying is that the person playing types in a number. Input is the basic command for type in, and I just means any number you like.
Oh, okay.
Then what happens next depends on what the number is. So we've got 40 if I is less than 1, or if I is greater than 10. Then print. Bad choice.
Right. So if they type, say, 0 or 11, that appears on the screen.
Exactly. And then this next line takes them back to where it asks them to type in a number between 1 and 10.
That's line 50. I see. And line 60 says, if I equals 6, then print. Correct. Ah, okay. So if they've typed 6, they've got it right.
And if they haven't typed 6, which is the next line, then try again comes up on the screen, and that takes them back to where they choose another number.
It's clever. Well done.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You are going to hear a student arranging to transfer between English classes. She is leaving a message on the language department's answering machine. The student's name is Mei Lee. First look at questions 11 to 17. As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 11 to 17.
Hello, this is Mei Lee speaking. This message is for Mrs. Brooks in Student Affairs. Mrs. Brooks, I telephoned you last week and you told me to call back and put the details of my request to transfer on the answering machine. I hope you can hear me easily. I have the form here and I'll give you the information working from the top to the bottom. As you know, my family name is Lee, spelled L-E-E, and my first name is May. My student number is 002312. That's 002312. I'm in Mr. Anderson's class. You know, he's the one who helps out with the football team. The next part of the form asks for my address. I'll give it slowly. I live at Flat 5, 10 University Avenue. You probably know the building. It's just near the engineering school. The telephone number is 818-6074. And I share it with a lot of other people, so it's often engaged. I'll give it to you again. 86074. I think that's all I have to put on this part of the form. I know you were curious about my reason for requesting a transfer, so I'll explain that next.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
Now I'll tell you why I want to transfer between classes. Mrs. Brooks, I really like my teacher and my classmates, but I find it very hard not to speak in my own language. I just begin to think in English when the class ends, and I'm surrounded by other people from my country, so it's natural that we all speak in our mother tongue. I have been looking around for a class where there are very few other people from my country, so I'll be forced to use English. The best class I can find is the evening class, which begins at 6 p.m. Most of the students in that class come from countries which speak Spanish, and I can't speak a word, so I must use English. I have an Italian friend in the class, and she tells me there are 2 Hong Kong Chinese, 6 Spanish speakers, and 1 Japanese student. She says most people speak English at the break, although sometimes the Spanish slip into their own language. I checked the class list, and 2 students have dropped out of the evening class, so there should be room for me. Could you please see if I can join the class? I'm not sure what the class number is, but the evening class I want is in room 305 of the Trotter Building. The class I'm in now is next door to the Trotter Building in Prince Tower, so it's very easy for me to find my way to the new class. I'm not going home until late today, so could you please leave a message for me at my friend Margaret's house? Her number is 812-7543, and she has an answering machine. I do hope you can transfer me, Mrs. Brooks. If there is any more information you need, please call me. Thank you very much.
That is the end of section 2. You will now have some time to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
Richard Murray, a zoologist and popular TV personality, has been giving a talk on endangered species of wildlife to members of the Young Conservationists Association in a small town in the south of England. Listen to the extract from the discussion he had with 2 of the young people after his talk.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
What would you say, Mr. Murray, are the main reasons that so much of our wildlife will have died out by the end of the next few decades?
Well, Tony, We can't, of course, rule out the effect of urbanization due to the spread of population. But apart from that, I believe there are two reasons which, in a way, are like the opposite ends of a piece of string. If you tie a knot in that piece of string, you end up with a circle, and whichever way you go round, it's going to turn out to be the same.
I don't think I quite get that, Mr. Murray.
Well, let's put it another way. It's rather like a film. You've got the good guys and the bad guys. They're pulling in opposite directions, but when it comes to the final showdown, it's hard to make out which is which.
What are your two reasons, Mr. Murray?
I call them greed and caring.
Greed and caring?
Yes, I know they don't seem to have much to do with one another, but think about it. The motive of greed is pretty obvious. In the course of the next few months, thousands of baby seals will be bludgeoned to death before they're even weaned from their mothers. What for? For the sale of their skins at inflated prices to please the vanity of a few and line the pockets of the killers. Crocodiles will be slaughtered to provide shoes and handbags for the rich. Gorillas, tigers, leopards and rhinos will be hunted for senseless sport or poached in defiance of regulations. Their skins, their horns, and their magnificent heads will be used as trophies to decorate someone's living room floor or walls.
That's terrible.
Yes, but it's not all. The whale, probably the most impressive and certainly one of the most intelligent sea mammals in creation, will be cruelly hunted and harpooned to make more money for the profiteers. The dolphin, the sailor's friend, will be indiscriminately battered to death at so much a head on the grounds that it is taking away the livelihood of a few fishermen by consuming the fish in its natural habitat.
But surely, Mr. Murray, we do have to keep warm. We need whale oil and ambergris. Fishermen have to make a living.
Part of what you say is true, of course, Tony, but we shall have to enforce far stricter controls if future generations are not to find themselves in a world devoid of wildlife as we know it.
Well, I see what you mean about fur coats and crocodile handbags, Mr. Murray, but I don't understand what you mean by caring. That can't be bad, surely. I mean, I thought we were supposed to be living in a caring society.
Well, so we do, in a way. The trouble is, there are so many well-intentioned people who start out with the best possible motives of trying to protect or immunize us from this, that, or the other in the most effective way, at the quickest possible rate. But in their enthusiasm, they lose sight of the long-term consequences. It's only very gradually that the danger to other forms of life, including humans, comes out. Not to say leaks out, and by that time it'll probably be too late to do much about it. Take insecticides, for instance.
But
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
But insecticides protect crops from pests. They destroy disease-carrying mites and creepy crawlies like cockroaches.
True, but nature has a way of developing her own immunity against insecticides and other pest controls, with the result that the biologists are driven to inventing stronger and stronger compounds, which, though they may annihilate the pest, nevertheless permeate the environment, are assimilated by plant and animal life, and become absorbed by the soil. Countless innocent creatures, the beaver or the mole, for example, are performing a useful task in the natural control. The alarming prospect is that as these poisons enter the foods we eat, and consequently our own systems, they'll find their way into the body of the pregnant mother and into her milk, offering incalculable risks to the unborn or newly born infant. In spite of all our technological expertise, our time is running out. We're virtually destroying ourselves.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. In this section, you will hear a report about crime and punishment in the UK. First read questions 31 to 40. Listen to the report and answer questions 31 to 40.
Like many other countries, Britain has experienced a great increase in criminal activity of nearly every kind. Nearly 5 times as many acts of violence were reported to the police in 1997 as 20 years before. Although most burglars are not caught, those who are caught overload the courts and prisons. Although the courts try, in theory at least, to use probation, community service, and other devices to avoid sentencing people to prison. The 50,000 people in prison are more in proportion to the population than in any other Western European countries. Vast sums are being spent on building new prisons, but the prisons are still overcrowded, and the humiliation suffered by their inmates makes rehabilitation difficult. Many prisoners are released early on parole. The prisons in England are run by the Home Office, though each prison has a local board of visitors who make reports about conditions and also deal with serious bad behaviour. Normally, prisoners are released after serving 2/3 or less of the time for which they were sentenced. But an offence in prison may be punished by the loss of some days of remission. There are several kinds of prisons, including open ones, and some prisoners go out to work in groups outside. Prisoners who want to study for examinations are helped to do so, and there are training courses in prisons. But in practice, some spend little time outside their cells. Most crime is committed by young males, and is opportunist and is not planned by hardened professional criminals, although these do exist in most common people's view. Crime tends to be concentrated in large cities and urban areas. About 94% of offences recorded by the police in England and Wales are directed against property, but only 5% involve violence. Rising affluence has provided more opportunities for casual property crime. In 1977, for example, car crime was only 1/10 of total crime, but this has risen to about 28%. The demand for and supply of illegal drugs had been an increasing factor in the incidence of crime in recent years. Regular crime surveys are undertaken in England and Wales, Scotland and in Northern Ireland. In 1999, a survey in England and Wales asked respondents for information about how crime had affected them in 1998. It estimated a total of 15 million crimes in 1998, the majority of which were against property. Violent crime accounted for only 5% of the total, while 36% involved vehicles, 9% were burglaries, and 30% other forms of theft. These surveys, the 5th of which is in progress, indicate that many crimes go unrecorded by the police, mainly because not all victims report them.
That is the end of section 4. You will have half a minute to check your answers.